I am trying to complete Pokemon Yellow using all 151 available Pokemon in the Pokedex. Today we are going to do a rather large change of pace and take a look at number 151, Mew. Now, I understand that this may feel very out of left field to suddenly switch to the very end of the Pokedex, but we are going to be doing this for a couple of good reasons, and I hope that you will follow me throughout all of these, and I think the last one, of course, will definitely entice the most. The first being that, yes, we've been taking a look a lot at the early stage Pokemon, the base forms, the unevolved, the people that you can find on the earlier routes throughout the game, or the starters. A lot of Pokemon who maybe have some great movesets, but not a lot of power. And so therefore, taking a look at Mew is going to be the polar opposite, and we are going to get a really great look at what happens when you have a Pokemon with exemplary stats and move pools. It really means that you're going to see what is potentially one of the best possible ways you can play through the game. The other reason is because Scott's Thoughts was doing a Mew speedrun race with his community. I downloaded this newer version of the software, I downloaded the specific patch, I did everything that we were supposed to do in order to participate in this race. However, this was not what I submitted for that race. Unfortunately, it's actually not anything I submitted at all because of the fact that I didn't submit anything. Now, I have a good reason for that, which we're going to come back to in just a moment, because there's two elements to it. But first, let's take a look at Mew and why I really wanted to participate in this race, and why I really wanted to do this exact thing, and why I then decided to, even if this wasn't what I was going to submit, why I would still share it with you today. Now, of course, I've already given the spiel about how this is going to be a complete total opposite, right? But I also think it's because it helps break these things up in a way that makes things a little bit more exciting. I obviously have been thinking a lot about how Mewtwo would probably be the very last Pokemon, or potentially Mew, but I also recognize that I wasn't going to do those two back to back anyway, so I was going to put one of them somewhere in the mix of everything at some point. Now, I feel like Mew, especially because we're doing the race, this felt like a good time to just break everything up and throw him in there and show you what this little guy is capable of. And it's a lot. If you look at the right-hand side of the screen, you are going to see a lot of color and a move pool that is almost completely full. And that is very exciting because usually we've got some variety, but there isn't a Pokemon yet that we have approached that has had this level of coverage, of options, and let me tell you, I really thought long and hard about what I was going to potentially use throughout this game, because there are some really great moves that we haven't seen yet, or that maybe we've looked at maybe just once. Like, we've used Fire Blast once, right? And we used it only for the champion. We haven't used a lot of the other type of special moves that some of the later stage Pokemon can obtain, and so therefore Mew can as well. But there were a lot of cool things here too, where we were looking at things like Ice Beam, a move that we haven't really used a lot either, but we've used it specifically using Mimic. This is a Pokemon that obviously can also learn Mimic, but we've talked recently about how using Mimic is really something that you should only do in a Pokemon that really can't beat the game without it. I mean, again, I suppose if you're speedrunning, yes, obviously you could run that move, but I really don't believe that Mew desperately needs it. Mew can pretty much learn any move that you could imagine anyway, so just go ahead and teach the Pokemon the move. Now, here is an interesting thing about those moves though, which is the fact that in the very beginning of the game, there is not a lot of options, right? That is the one juxtaposition to this whole thing. When we get to this stage of the game, we are already about 5 minutes in. There are a lot of people who were at this section of the game even faster than I was. I took on this particular run a little bit of an experimental run at attempting to see what would happen if I did backtrack just a little bit and fight the rival the second time. I don't think it's necessary, but I thought maybe if his team was the Jolteon team, which I think would be the easiest one to defeat, perhaps each time we went up against him, we would make up some of that time. We will find out about that later on, though. What we are at now is the Brock split. This is where a lot of attempts in that race that you will see in the final version of the video, where all of these almost 100 submissions, unfortunately not including mine, get kind of put up one after another, or one against one another rather. You will see that so many of them are getting through this section way faster. This was an attempt where I was really proud of this one. This is actually the main reason why I am showing this attempt, because there are so many recordings that I have. But this was one where I did not need to use Transform in order to beat the Onix. I would argue that typically that is the best way to beat Onix, and sometimes maybe even the only way. I got very lucky with the types of moves that he was selecting. He didn't use Bide all that much. I was able to just keep using Pound, and even though it wasn't doing a lot of damage because of the very good stats for Mew, especially even at this point, look at that, we're already in the 40s across the board, and HP is already at 60. We are doing considerably better than anything that has been showcased on this channel so far. So we got a very interesting and different run than I got against Brock in really any of the other games. This was also, like I mentioned, the run where I did a little bit of an experiment with the rival. I only completed 2 runs doing this version of the path that I chose for the race. And the big thing for that is that, like, obviously there were so many resets and so many different attempts, because really I don't believe I saved the game even once in this particular run. There might be one single one near the ending just in case, but really throughout this entire game, especially with a Pokemon like Mew, you can kind of just run it. You can kind of just go. And one of the big things that I tried to utilize a lot were a couple other techniques that I learned about throughout this game that I don't think we could have done with a Pokemon like Pikachu or Ekans, but for sure a Pokemon like Mew can use. We'll come back to that one as well later. There's so many different things that I'm going to be teasing here and showcasing throughout the video, but I'm hoping that, like, by telling you ahead of time that there's a lot of different things that I have learned, that as they come up naturally throughout the video, hopefully you will also learn something new in this experience like I have. Now, here is an interesting part already, because I haven't saved, there's no way to really reset. I did not mean to go this far into this room. I did not want to do this fight, but I kind of had to just accept it and take it. And that's going to be a few extra seconds on this particular run. But like I said, I was trying a few different things, getting a little experimental with how I was doing things. And this is one where I learned Mega Punch early. I took the few extra seconds to drop down and get that move, because sometimes I would get to this section into the fight that we're about to see, and I would go up against the Grimer, and it would use Disable instantly, and it would get Pound. And if I have to transform with the 2 Pokemon that remain, there's just not enough options. The Grimer would just keep dying, or technically Mew, but the Grimew would just die every time, and I would lose the run, and I would have to reset. So that is just one of those things where I realized, okay, if I'm going to do this run, instead of trying to take too many gambles, maybe I take a few extra seconds, pick up Mega Punch early. That way, even if Pound does get taken away, I still have another move left over. So that's yet another thing that I learned on this run. Now, another big thing here for me is something that we've talked about a few times in the other runs, which is setup moves, specifically because there are glitches within this game that you can utilize. And even with Mew, it's good to use, because we're going to be definitely not super underleveled compared to other Pokemon that we've used, just because of the fact that we still have to fight quite a few people. And actually, Mew does level up quite well in the early game. Mew levels up so quickly throughout this whole thing, despite being in a lot fewer battles than any of the other Pokemon that we have run this game with so far. And yes, I'm aware that there's going to be so many people that are way beyond this point, even at the time that I am here. I defeat the Staryu just at about 9 minutes and 50 seconds, and so I'm going to beat Misty just at about 10 minutes. And there's definitely people who have way faster times than that. But considering what we've seen so far on this channel, that time feels unheard of, and that's very exciting. So going back to the glitch conversation and the badge boost that we were mentioning, there are a few things that Mew can do, but specifically the one that we're going to see today is something that we have used previously with a Pokemon such as Bulbasaur, for example, the earliest rendition of this whole thing. We are going to be using a move called Swords Dance. That is something that we will find much later in the game, but it is one of the many moves that Mew can learn. Mew only learns 5 moves just from leveling up. 4 of them are normal type moves. You start off with Pound, you then of course learn Transform, you learn Mega Punch, which I taught through TM early, Metronome at level 30, don't do that, then Psychic at level 40, we will actually also learn that one early using a TM as well. It's a little bit of a spoiler, a little bit of a look ahead perhaps, sneak peek preview, but there's so many different things that you can learn. Let's run through these real quick while we're going through the Nugget Bridge and the journey over to Bill's house. You can learn Mega Punch, Razor Wind, Swords Dance, Whirlwind, which is useless in this game, Mega Kick, Toxic, Horn Drill, Body Slam, Takedown, Double Edge, Bubble Beam. Okay, now we're finally getting some moves that are not normal types. Toxic was also poison, but you get the idea. Bubble Beam, Water Gun, Ice Beam, Blizzard, Hyper Beam, Payday, Submission, Counter, Seismic Toss, Rage, bad in this generation, Mega Drain, Solar Beam, Dragon Rage, Thunderbolt, Thunder, Earthquake, Fissure, Dig, Psychic, Teleport, Mimic, Double Team, Reflect, Bide, Metronome, Self-Destruct, Egg Bomb, which is crazy to me. I feel like it should only be the Egg Pokemon, but whatever, it's Mew. He can learn everything, right? Fire Blast, Swift, Skull Bash, Soft Boiled, Dream Eater, Sky Attack, Rest, Thunder Wave, Psy Wave, Explosion, Rock Slide, Tri Attack, Substitute, Cut, Fly, Surf, Strength, and Flash. My goodness. When you look at the screen after this fight here, you'll notice that it literally uses every single slot except for one at the very bottom, just one little one that it could have used. And I'm kind of surprised that there's no way to learn a move like Hypnosis or something that would put a Pokemon to sleep, considering it can also learn Dream Eater, but you know, I guess beggars can't be choosers. Perhaps you get someone else on your team that can put it to sleep for you. The Mew finishes it off. I don't know, who knows? Either way, we're not going to be worrying about that move today. Doesn't matter. We are really going to be mostly looking at some of the moves that we've already featured on this channel, and actually kind of a very similar run to Rattata. In a way, this run is going to be kind of like the ultimate Rattata moveset, and also still using some elements of a couple other runs that we have seen so far. A good example of that would be that we're going to be using Ice Beam over Blizzard later, just because of the fact that Ice Beam has way less of a chance to miss. Blizzard in this game has a 90% chance, which to me always feels like it's less than that, unless it's being used against me, of course, then it's always hitting. Then Ice Beam again hits just a little under, but it does hit more often, so that is going to be the safer route. Plus, Mew is so strong, it should make up the difference in power anyway. We are going to use Dig for a good while, mostly because since it is a speed run, it's tough because I probably don't want to use it the entire game, just because it does take 2 turns every time I'm using the move. However, it is great utility for leaving spaces. So there's a little bit of a push and pull with that move. It's one of the main reasons why I don't stick with it long term, but I really considered using it fully. It really was not until I was in the Discord for this event that I decided, yeah, looking at some of the math and some of the things that smarter people and better people than I am have discovered, Dig is not the move for the entire time. So I did move on. There are so many different runs that I tried here with different learn sets. There were some that I never used Dig at all, actually. I used it mostly as a utility on my Charmander, the same way that it learns Cut in pretty much every other video that I do. There was a version of this where I didn't teach it anything that was, I believe, a TM that was not from a gym leader. I tried kind of like a interesting take on that of like, what if I only use things that other people specifically hand me. Like, I can't pick it up off the ground. So the only other exception to that would be a move like Mimic, which I did not use in that run, but I did also do Ice Beam. And I kind of considered using that run as well, the one where I was kind of just attempting not exactly any kind of meme set, which is something that a lot of people do. There's a lot of runs that get submitted. They're definitely gimmick based. And those are people who are recognizing that they're not necessarily speed running, which is my spiel every time I do one of these videos. But this is honestly my best attempt at trying this sort of thing out. This is, again, not my best timed run either, but I do think it's one of my more interesting ones, just because of the fact that I experimented so much throughout this process. And as I mentioned in a previous clip in this video, I really only did this path twice, or successfully. There were a few that I quit very early, like before I even defeated Brock, either because Brock beat me or I was looking at the time going, I'm taking way too long to get here. I gotta start over. That was a big thing that I learned about this too. There are so many times through your runs where it's just gonna be, yeah, man, it's time to abandon the run. You didn't get to Brock in less than 10 minutes or whatever the case may be. It's time to start over. And some of the more infuriating ones would be ones where I would get 2/3 of the way or more and then realize, oh no, I've done something completely wrong, or I've messed something up big time, or I forgot a major thing. And to go back and get it, it's going to set me back even further. Just reset. Nothing worse. I think the worst one that I ever had was I don't save throughout any of these, right? And so based on the rules that we were using for this race, there were a lot of things where I wasn't saving in order to save time. And I got to the champion and just had a bad roll. 2 misses and got hit, crit, died. So there was nowhere to reset to. The reset was new game. Yeah, that one was about 43.5 minutes ish, a little bit over, about 4:36 when I went down, and the clock continued to run for about a minute as I just sat there, controller in hand. Couldn't believe my luck. If I still have that save somewhere, I did at one point kind of go through and delete some of the runs that were, 5 minutes or less. Mostly just to save space on my computer, really. But I was doing so many attempts. I basically attempted, on average, I would say 2 to 3 full runs every day for about a week. And of course, that does mean that there's a lot of quickly abandoned runs. And so I would spend about 2 to 3 hours every day working on this. That's another reason why this video is technically just a little bit late. I really did try to, over the weekend, perfect my run just to see if I could get it done. However, my best run was just under 42 minutes, and considering the best runs that were out there, I was about 10 minutes too slow. Even with really progressively getting better throughout my time, there are people who are way better at this, who have been doing it for way longer. I wasn't holding a candle, and I just didn't feel ready yet to showcase this with everyone else. Of course, I'm still showing you one of my runs, but considering it wasn't even my best run, it was just the more interesting one, I felt like this was something that I could kind of compromise and show and not really step on any toes of anyone else's run or anything like that. Especially because I would love to know this, but I really don't think that anyone else did a run where they did the sort of backtracking and fought the rival a second time. I mean, if they did, they surely lost time the way that I did, right? So there's no way that anyone has one of the shortest times with that rival fight. Did they? I don't know. We'll have to watch and find out. That video will come out way later. Also, you probably didn't catch it there, but I just did something right before this self-destructing hitchhiker, who, by the way, is not an issue at all when you have Bubble Beam. I just did something that I've never done before because I learned something from the community, which is that the female junior trainer that is just before him, you can actually skip her if you want to. I have fought her every single time. But you can actually just go to the very bottom of the little gap there and she won't see you. Didn't know that until about 3 days before I recorded this take. So that's pretty exciting. Anyway, you just learn little tips and tricks as you go. I really think it's very cool to see the community come together and work with one another to teach people how to get better. There's probably people who got better times than the people who taught them their things because they are combining that information with information from another person and then their own experiences. I just think that's very cool. I like how productive and supportive Scott's Thoughts community is. So shout out to all of them. In fact, let me actually shout out 3 specific people just because I learned probably the most from them. Of course, there is Scott himself. Then there's also Gym Leader Matt. And there's also, I'm going to do my best on this one, Exarion maybe? I don't think I've ever heard anyone say this name out loud, but Exarion. Those 3 really helped. Oh, and Ike the Killer. I saw a lot of stuff from Ike the Killer that I think was very helpful as well. So thank you so much to folks like them who have really done a lot within this space, within the coaching section of that Discord as well. Learned so many new things about this game, and I'm looking forward to using them in other runs for other Pokemon as well. Now, back to this particular run, this is where we are going to pick up Ice Beam. This is going to be crucial later on in the game. I'm not going to use it just yet. I actually probably could for this section in particular, but honestly, I still feel like Body Slam has a lot of execution that I can use, and I just feel like I'm not quite ready to give up the one majorly physical move that I have. Obviously, Dig is also physical, but it is a 2-move turn, and I don't really love that I'm still using it. I don't know. Maybe one day I'll go back and do this exact run one last time and try and pick up Earthquake just a little bit faster. But I don't know. It's tough. It's really tough to see. Sometimes hindsight is 20/20. Sometimes you get ideas later on, and sometimes they don't even work. But either way, we make it through. We are already 4 badges in at 24 minutes. Now, considering, I'm going to say it probably 30 more times in this video, considering how many people are probably way beyond that point at this time in their videos is pretty astounding. But when you look at my best time I've ever done with anything so far, 24 minutes feels, it just feels like I am soaring. I'm just zooming by. I mean, even in this moment, I looked away from my screen just for a brief moment to state how fast I'm going, and I looked down just in time to see Eevee go down. It's incredible how fast this system is. I feel like I'm falling in love with the whole speedrunning concept in real time, both in those recordings and even right now. Like, the more that I kind of gush about it, the more that I kind of get a little bit more excited about the potential of some of these Pokemon and going back to the old ones and seeing about speedrunning those in a new way and potentially beating both my old times and maybe some other times from other people within the community. I don't know. Maybe we're seeing the dawn of something new for me. I will see. I feel like right now I'm still getting a little bit more comfortable with the game and with each of these Pokemon. But, you know, if we want to keep the content going, perhaps we do first attempts, and then maybe it's not just the beginning Pokemon that we do second attempts with. Maybe we do some speedruns of everybody after that. I don't know. Still a little early to tell, but I could totally see myself, if Scott ever does another one of these races, I could totally see myself really giving it my all. And now that I know even more by that point, really putting all of my effort and all my eggs into one basket for just a brief little week and really trying to get into that top 10. That'd be a fun thing to see, I think. That being said, this also kind of gives me a little bit of a reminder about why I started doing this in the first place, right? I have enjoyed watching other people speedrun these games and have toyed around with the idea of maybe getting into it before. But the big thing for me is how much Pokemon is a comfort thing for me. At the worst times in my life, I've always known that when I needed to decompress a little bit after those really big moments, taking a little bit of time for myself to just sort of sit down and put something on the television or watch a stream or put a podcast on and pick up one of these games. It's astounding how much I can just unplug my brain for a little bit and try something, whether it's just a regular playthrough or a Nuzlocke or some kind of crazy challenge that I'm creating or borrowing from someone else. It doesn't matter what that may be. It's just so interesting to me how much it just really kind of calms the nerves. Despite, maybe having some moments here and there in some of these other runs where I've definitely been fortunate that I was not recording audio at that moment, because I've been pretty good about keeping this channel very PG-13. There's been a few words that have slipped out towards, honestly, Venomoth. Venomoth has really gotten my ire a few times. I've definitely had a few "are you blanking kidding me's" in there in the course of these runs. Sometimes these guys really kind of just find every button to press for you, Either way, Pokemon is a comfort thing for me, and I find that even editing this video, I'm looking back at some of these things and really feeling just so much nostalgia. Silphco, for example. I feel like there's been a lot of time in my life as a kid where I just explored and wandered around. I remember how challenging the teleportation fields felt to me. I couldn't really figure out how they worked per se, or I couldn't really find a pattern. I couldn't really remember which ones led to what place. I was very young, right? It was kind of difficult, I think, to parse through all that information. Plus, definitely undiagnosed ADD was probably also playing a large part in that. Speaking of ADD, I just added a new move that was bad. I apologize for that one. But we did just get Swords Dance. This is going to be a big part of the move pool for the rest of the video. And let me explain that as we defeat the rival for our 5th time, Rival 5-0 as many say. We are defeating him in very quick fashion, and we are going to also describe in a maybe slightly less fast fashion the idea and concept of a badge boost. This is something that you have probably already noticed on the left-hand side of the screen, which is that 3 of my stats currently, because I still have to get the 7th badge later on, and the 6th, of course, but the 7th badge will be the one that gives me the last of these boosts. When I've defeated the 1st, 3rd, and 5th gyms so far, we got a little boost to each of these stats, right? So we obviously got the very first one, the attack boost, once we defeated Brock in Pewter City. It adds 1/8 of your current stat on and gives you this little boost, right? Now, the big thing, of course, is that anytime you use a move that raises or elevates your attack, your defense, what have you, you are moving up in a stage. You can move up to +6, where it boosts your stats up. Now, the big thing about this generation is that there was a little bit of a glitch, and that is that every time you move one of your stats, it re-rolls that boost from the badge and tacks it on again. So if you can go up +6 in anything that does a +1, for example, you are adding an 1/8 and an 1/8 and an 1/8 and an 1/8 and an 1/8. And so, of course, when you see that stat go up, it's getting these extra stacks of damage, right? But it gets better than that, because every time you have a badge boost, every time you use this, not only does it reroll and attach it to the thing that you are already also obviously adding a stat bonus on top of, you are also re-rolling and adding it to every other stat. And that is the main reason why I was able to beat Blaine there. Blaine, I do think, is a lot harder of a person to deal with if you don't have a badge boost, especially at the level that we're at right now. His Pokemon hit very hard, as do Giovanni's. This is going to be a very interesting take on this, because usually when we get here, you are watching a lot of resets, a lot of min-maxing, a lot of trying to figure out the best possible way to approach these Pokemon. I do take a little bit more damage here than I was expecting with Mew, but that's also because, again, I'm taking some attacks as I'm doing the setup. But with that setup, look at those stats, 469. I'm hitting like a truck, which is great. That's sometimes what I nickname my Mews, just because of the fact that they always said back in the day when we were growing up that if you were to use strength on the truck just outside of the SS Anne, that you would find a Mew. Of course, it was never there, but I definitely tried it many, many times. The way that I used to spend time just saying, okay, maybe if I just push against it with my character, just press and hold, maybe eventually it'll move. No, little man, it's not happening. Not today, not any day. But today you do have a Mew, and that's the best thing that you can really hope for. Now, I will point out the fact that we are already almost all the way through the Rivals team one last time, because the next time we see him, he will be the champion, and definitely much more difficult. But we have made it through him so easily, like a hot knife through butter. I wasn't really sure what analogy I was going to go for there, but sometimes even I don't know what I'm going to say next, probably to everyone's detriment, including my own. Either way, we have made it through Indigo Plateau. Nothing really to show there. I didn't do any training, except for one person just because I fought them on accident, but it doesn't really matter. I got to this section. I used some of my rare candies, not a lot, but just a couple, just to make sure that we've leveled up a little bit and we are at a flat level cap. And we are going to go through here. I probably could have used more because Lorelei does almost kill us with Blizzard. That got very close. That was almost the end of the run. I would also like to point out that, again, we are later than my best run that I ever got in this game. It does show that perhaps the experiment that I made with the rival did end up just taking too much time. It set us behind just enough that I think it all compounded from there. Even though we had an extra level to begin with, it just the amount of time that we sank into the beginning of the game wasn't really ever made up, which is a little bit of a bummer. And of course, like I said, we had a couple extra fights that we didn't really mean to take. But either way, we're doing okay. We're already at 45 minutes. This is considerably lower than anything else we've seen so far. I think maybe only Butterfree got through her team this quickly. I think that is correct. I'm not sure anyone else could do even that quickly. Either way, at 46 minutes, we are now going up against Lance. At this point, we have removed Psychic, which seems crazy, again, for a Psychic Pokemon, but it's not really going to be super effective against anyone else in this game. We have replaced it with Ice Beam. Finally, the final move gets added on. We immediately go in, and with Lance, honestly, the best thing to do, in my opinion, at least in this kind of race, is just attack. If you can use a move that's super effective, just get in there. Don't even bother with the setup because they can still hit you with something that could crit or go wrong. Just get in there. Don't get paralyzed. Make sure you're outspeeding. Ice Beam all the way, baby. Now, we use a quick elixir and get all of our power back just in case. And we're going to use Ice Beam instantly against Sandslash. Sandslash has also been a big thorn in our side in other runs. Now, Alakazam does take a little bit more time to go down than I would like to hope, but we can use Exeggutor to set up because even if he does manage to hypnosis us, we can attack and just wake up. He's not going to do too much to us. But of course, we get a lucky freeze there. I probably could have done another setup, but I really didn't think we needed it. Look at those stats. All of them in the 200s with the exception of defense, 500 for attack. That's all that we need to outspeed everyone and just bing, bang, boom, done. 48 minutes, almost exactly on the dot, 0.4 seconds in there. Pretty crazy. I also felt like that was another reason why I wanted to showcase this run. The fact that it was exactly on a minute, basically, was kind of fun. But anyway, that is Mew, a basically perfect Pokemon in general and for speedrunning. Something that I had a lot of fun doing, by the way. Something that I have considered maybe trying again at some point. I see myself as a little bit more of a cozy Pokemon content creator, but that does not mean that speedruns cannot be considered cozy content. So you let me know in the comments section below if you're interested in more content like that, or if there's anything else you would like to see me attempt here on this channel, because I take every piece of feedback seriously. If you've made it this far and have enjoyed the content, please consider giving it a like, a share, a comment on one of the questions I posed earlier in the comment section below, a subscribe. Anything that you do helps little content creators like myself a lot. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all next week for another solo challenge in Pokemon Yellow.